Welcome to Life in the Pit, a podcast about the lives and adventures of instrumentalists within the wonderful world of musical theater. And now, here is your host, David Lane.
And hello, everybody. Welcome to episode number 62. Finally, an episode in 2022. And first, right away, let me just apologize. It's at least a week later than I intended to get this first episode out of the new year. A lot has been going on. I've had some winter storms in the area, which is actually kind of funny. You'll hear me talking in the interview about the shorts and t-shirt weather that we've had in my area, and that was recorded on January 2nd, and that was the last day of such weather. It has been a true winter in North Carolina for January since then, and but that's not the main reason why I'm at least a week late in getting this out to you. Some of you know already, so I'll just go ahead and mention for the rest of you that my father passed away on January 6th in Florida, and as I mentioned, it was very touching because he died 20 minutes after I got there, after I'd driven the 620 something miles to get there, and all of his children were with him at the end. I won't say too much about Dad other than he was an amateur bluegrass musician. He played mandolin, never considered it professional, but he loved to play. He developed a really high ability, high skill on the mandolin, and was a big-time fan of old-time bluegrass, and seemed to always have at least one, sometimes two or three different groups that he would play with. He also was very shy and did not like to sing, and he took up singing later in life, which I always thought was very admirable. At any rate, I'm very thankful for my dad's 90 years on this earth, and just for the legacy that he provided me and my siblings, and just glad that he's at peace. And I thank you for those who knew already and have reached out to me. Your kind words and thoughts have meant a lot during this time. So it just kind of goes to say 2022 has not started out super well for me, but that means that there's plenty of room to go up from here. And go ahead and start with getting back to this. And, just a reminder, we're still talking mostly with theater musicians, but we're going to try to kind of broaden the horizon here going forward and talk about some things that aren't always exclusively pit related. And I thought today's guest might be a good transition piece for that type of thinking. Today I'm going to be chatting with Tanner Harrod. We'll be talking about the fact that he's done some things in the pit. He plays guitar, but he also plays French horn, so he has experience in that in Texas, in Oklahoma, and currently in Nebraska. And we're mainly going to be talking about what brought him to Nebraska, and that is the fact that he is a doctoral student of composition who's studying there at the moment, and he talks about the challenges of, taking that up and being in a new community during the pandemic. And we also talk about a theme that I think is going to be a regular occurrence going forward on the show, and that is the fact that for the vast majority of people who play in the pit, it is a part-time job. What are the things that you can do to not only supplement your income, but also that feed back into your pit experience to make you a better overall musician? So we're going to talk about that and more. Here's my conversation with Tanner Harrod. Tanner, you were the first interview of 2022, so welcome, sir. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me.
So tell us, first of all, just a little bit about yourself. Like, where are you from originally? Where do you live now? And, if you, when people ask what it is that you do, just, I know for a lot of musicians that's a little tricky, but, give us your best job description.
Sure thing. So I am originally from Dallas, Texas, was born and raised there. And did my undergraduate degree in music education at Texas A&M University Commerce, which is about an hour northeast of Dallas. So then I've slowly moved my way up north. I did my master's degree in music theory at the University of Oklahoma. And now I am working on my Doctor of Musical Arts degree in composition at the University of Nebraska, Lincoln.
Okay, nice. It's two of those three states I've never been to. So I've been to Texas. Although I've never been to Dallas, I do want to go to Dallas just because I'm a bit of a Kennedy aficionado, so I've always wanted to like see the route and all that. I've been to Austin and San Antonio a couple of times. So basically I've been to places near I-10.
Right.
Never been to Oklahoma, never been to Nebraska. It's like there's a whole big rectangle in the middle of the country I've never been to.
Oh, yeah. You got to come sometime.
Oh, yeah. I imagine your weather's probably a little more like winter than ours is right now. So
right now, especially. So I'm looking at my phone, and it is 11 degrees Fahrenheit outside, and we've got a nice, healthy layer of snow right now.
Wow. Well,
yesterday was a big snowstorm day.
Nice. We might we're supposed to get colder weather tomorrow, but since Christmas Day, I've been in shorts and a t-shirt. It's been, it was 80 degrees yesterday, and I think it only got up to 71 today, but it's, I'm personally not a big fan. I grew up in Florida, so, I'm used to this kind of weather this time of the year, but I like the break of winter, it's like, and I've got some nice long sleeve shirts in my closet I'd like to break out.
Oh, sure.
For the 3 months we get anything,
Yeah, well, tonight it will be a low of -8.
Oh.
So that's something to look forward to.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if I want your kind of winter, but,
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so the only time I ever hear about Nebraska, I do follow college football, and of course Nebraska, was kind of similar. I pull for Florida State in football, and
yes,
both of those. I mean, those were the two teams of the 1990s. It's like
right,
and in varying ways. Although Florida State had a couple of really good years in the past decade, but aside from that, like neither of those teams have been very relevant in college football for a while, and I don't even know like if music students, even catch wind of that when they're on campus or not, or I don't even know how much you've been on campus, but around here, it's funny. I feel like our undergraduate students are really into it because the Cornhusker marching band is still a really popular thing, right?
And we have a healthy amount of music majors that participate in the marching band, and then kind of at the graduate level and among the faculty, we usually on a Monday will come back and talk about how disappointing the previous Saturday was.
Well, that's true. I think,
and then,
the more I think about it, I wonder if it's not just kind of a symptom of being, as you move up the ladder of being a graduate student. Like I only have a master's degree, but I feel like kind of a tremendous sense of alumni pride and, that collegiate nostalgia for where I went to undergraduate school. But where I got my master's, I was like, nothing resonates when I hear that school. It's like, it's not
sure.
Like it's way up there. But of course, it was a conservatory. It's like not like they had a football team.
Right. And it's kind of the opposite for me because I did my undergraduate degree at a school that at the time was a Division II school. I believe they're moving up to Division I next season. Right. And then I did my master's degree at a huge football school, the University of Oklahoma.
Right.
So that's I think for me as an alum,
right.
Where maybe I feel the same as you do about the program itself and maybe about the university more generally. I can still be a Sooner football fan.
Right.
And when Nebraska is doing poorly, I can count on the Sooners to be doing well.
Right. Well, Oklahoma and Nebraska is one of the great rivalry games that doesn't happen anymore.
Actually, it has come back. So it was in Norman this past season, and this coming season it'll be in Lincoln. And my wife and I are hoping to catch that game.
Oh, great. Let's kind of go through what you told me again. Let's just talk about, how did you get into music, and how did that lead to what you're studying now?
Yeah, great question. So I got into music growing up in Dallas, especially. I was really fortunate to be in like the public music education system that so many districts in Texas are really blessed to have. So I didn't start doing music until I was in 6th grade band. French horn was my first instrument. And then by 8th grade, I started picking up guitar because I wanted to play in jazz band. As a symptom of it, though, we were kind of told growing up that there was 2 career options for a musician.
Right.
You could go be a band director in a public school, or you could be an orchestral performer, and there's not that many gigs out there, so you should go be a band director.
Right.
And so that was kind of the mindset growing up. And so I went to a school that was very big in music education, and has put out a lot of successful teachers. And I had a great time doing that degree, but at the same time was realizing that being a Texas band director was not necessarily the thing I was most passionate about.
Right.
And it was more about the general sense of music making with other people. So I really love the collaborative spirit of things. And so as I was finishing up my undergraduate degree and trying to figure out what I wanted to do next, I knew that the theory composition land was something that I was really excited about, and something I wanted to pursue more. So I went and looked at a variety of different programs and was looking for a master's degree that would give me a healthy balance of both of those areas. So at certain places I applied as a composer, and in certain places I applied as a music theorist. And while I was at OU doing my music theory degree, I took composition lessons the entire time.
Right.
And now I'm doing a composition degree at UNL after realizing that a PhD in music theory and learning German and French and Italian and writing papers all the time was not exactly what I wanted to do.
Right. Right.
But at the same time, I really wanted to keep up my playing, and especially in the theater. And one thing that I really loved about being here at UNL is that it's a place that encourages a lot of interdisciplinary study. So I'm involved in the jazz area as a guitarist, especially. Nowadays, I play a lot more guitar than I do French horn, though I still play horn. And so I'm really active at school, playing in the jazz ensembles, playing in combos, and then playing, in and around town as well.
Right. Great. One of the things you just said is something that I really appreciate, that, that you said that your school encourages interdisciplinary, just kind of getting around. And that's something I've said it more than a few times. It's, one of the schools I went to, the one that I kind of feel a bit more passionate about, they allowed me to do anything I wanted to. I got to sing in a chamber choir. I got to play I played French horn myself in the band and an orchestra. Got to accompany. A lot of schools around here, they don't have student accompanists. They hire outside accompanists. Now I can't complain because I'm one of the people that they hire. But I do sometimes. Feel for the students who are talented enough, accomplished enough to play, that they don't get that opportunity, to get that experience, while they're there.
Yeah. And sometimes it can even be that they don't know that they want that experience.
Exactly.
Especially like I can imagine accompanying, if you're a pianist and you've been playing a bunch of solo rep and you've really enjoyed that, they keep you on that track, and it never even occurs to you that accompanying might be something that you enjoy doing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
And I think slowly but surely, and more slowly than in some cases, I think music programs around the nation are kind of evolving toward this approach.
I hope so. Yeah.
And I think a lot of it is the realization that, what worked for a classical musician for a career option, say 40 or 50 years ago, is greatly diminished in that particular approach. That being, go get a tenured job in a symphony orchestra or get a tenured job as a professor. It's like those jobs are out there, but the number of people trying to get in versus the openings is
Yes.
quite small right there.
Right. And so it
So what we kind of like there's a podcast that I follow called The Portfolio Composer, and that I really like that term, and it's just talking about the portfolio of different ways that you earn a living, which is kind of where this podcast is heading. So you're the first
Yes.
interview I've had since I had a brief mini episode to kind of describe how I want the new this podcast to go going forward. And it's not to change what we've been talking about. We're talking to you, a theater musician. In fact, you fit the profile of what I've said. I want to talk to people all over the country, and I've never talked to anybody in Nebraska. So, and I don't think I've talked to anybody who's done things in Oklahoma. So it's a couple of states that we're adding to it. But most of the musicians that I've talked to are not full-time pit musicians. It's like it's very few circumstances where that can happen, actually. And even the Broadway guests, they intentionally get time off so that they can keep their fingers, in other pies and so forth, and to still be an artist. Because, one of the problems you have when you are the full-time player for a show, even when that show pays well, is unless it's one of maybe, I don't know, 5 to 10 shows ever, it will eventually close. And
Yes.
You'll need to find another job, and maybe find a job right away, or maybe not. There's not that many shows that pay well that are opening all the time or starting a tour that don't have an established player already. So it's really important, pit musician, if you're going to do it right, I think you're going to have other things going on. And if you're in more of a community theater or school theater type of thing, where the pay definitely isn't as good, you've got to have even more things going on. So, let's actually bring. Oh, sure. Go ahead.
So, I was just going to say, in addition to the pay part of it, I think it's good that we continue to do things beyond the theater, right? Especially if you're somebody who is playing the same show for an extended period of time,
right?
And you're playing, the same, 20, 25 charts over and over again that are in the same, at least, category of styles for whatever that show is, right?
Right.
And then you get the next gig that is still in the theater, but it's a completely different show than what you've done,
right,
for the last 6 months or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And you haven't had any time, playing in that new style.
Right.
Right. And so it's professional development, really, to be out there doing other things that are going to hone your musicianship beyond just being in the pit.
Right. Right. Let's bring theater into it a little bit. When did you first do a show for theater?
First time was in high school. I was really fortunate to be in a high school that didn't hire out people. I mean, I think except for the accompanist that was already playing the piano book for all the rehearsals and stuff.
What was your first show?
Guys and Dolls.
Okay.
So in high school, I did Guys and Dolls and Hairspray. One of those shows on French horn, one of those shows on guitar.
Okay. Yeah.
And so, and it was so much fun being around, so many different kinds of artists beyond what you get in the band hall. Right. And I think at the time I didn't appreciate how unique of an experience that was, because now as an adult, I know that, so many high schools don't rely on their high school musicians to play those books, because some of those books can be really hard. And, music education is different in all parts of the country. And so a lot of times we rely on, people like you and me who come in and just do the show and then head out. So I was really lucky that I got that experience early on.
Right. Sometimes a lot of high schools around here, they don't even have anybody on staff to music direct the shows. It's like it's funny. I've had to turn down an offer from two different people who reached out to me on behalf of a high school in this area to go music direct their shows. Like, I've got conflicts during those times, and it's kind of hard for me because they like to rehearse in the afternoons when I'm teaching, so that's very difficult for me. But so usually for schools, I'm like, I can come in for the, play keyboard 2 or something like that for a tech week or something like that. But so you play French horn, you play guitar. Have I not seen some social media of you playing keyboard too? Do you also play piano at all?
Not really.
Okay.
There are so the Guitar 2 book in Rent, for example, has some doublings on keyboard.
Right.
So it's acoustic guitar, electric guitar, keyboard, and the stuff in that book and stuff similar, I can get by on keyboard.
Right.
But anything beyond that is a skill that I'm just frankly not great at.
Right.
So keyboard is not really in my wheelhouse, but like in those couple of rare circumstances, I can get by.
Right. We'll talk a little bit about being a composer. What kind of music do you enjoy writing? What kind of genres or idioms, I think is the right word to say if you're in conservatory. And like what have been some of your experiences with, getting your music performed?
Yeah. So right now I'm writing a lot of either small chamber music stuff or stuff for soloists. The last couple of years being what they've been, it's been a great time for composers to get good at writing solo works.
Yes.
Because then you can practice them safely at home and rehearse with the composer over Zoom.
Yeah.
So I've been doing a lot of that stuff recently. But I, in that, kind of contemporary classical, we always use these big quotations around what that means and stuff like that. And so a lot of that chamber music has been where I've been living as a composer for a while now. Right.
Just as someone who's, studied composition, I'm always curious about different schools. So there was one school that turned me down, when I was applying for a master's.
Yeah.
And, and I got some comfort from the teacher I still had in my undergraduate school. There was two things he told me. One says, David, they have to first accept their own undergrad students, so who knows how many spots they even have for an outside person coming in. So that was the first bit of comfort. The second one was, though, he told me, you don't compose in the way they like to teach. It's like this particular school, at least at the time, was very interested in basically atonal, 12-tone experimental composers, and I was. The best way I could describe myself as a composer would be Samuel Barber, in that romanticism, but freely using 12-tone and some other, dissonances, freely using dissonances and so forth. But of course, I would, I'd go off the chart a little bit. I was a big fan of Penderecki and Ligeti and a few other composers like that. And but this school wanted that. I was very fortunate to have a composer who prioritized technique over style. So I'm just curious, if that's your experiences in Nebraska.
That's about my exact experience, including the rejection to a DMA program because I was probably not in that, experimental wing of the composer world.
Right.
And it was I had the exact same conversation with my master's degree teacher, and he was like, yeah, I mean, I really enjoy your music, but I just think this program was probably not a place you should have applied to in the first place. I was like, okay. And UNL is a place that is very much, technique over like a specific style.
Right.
We're also very fortunate in the fact that we have 3 very different composers on our faculty.
Right.
And so it's encouraged for composers to not spend all your time studying with one person. They encourage us to rotate through the faculty. So we have somebody who does a lot of chamber music, and he's the person that I study with. And then we have another person who's really into electronic music and film scoring. And we have our third composer is actually the director of orchestras, and does a lot of big orchestral works, concertos, symphonies, some operas, some things like that. And so anybody that is interested in something will find something here at UNL.
Right.
And that's been something that's I've really loved.
I really like that idea of rotating teachers. It probably doesn't work for a lot of things. Like I often, I had a piano teacher I really liked, and next door was a piano teacher who had some really good students. And in fact, I mean, you could almost argue that the average student coming out of that studio was better than the one coming out of the one I was studying with. But like that would not have gone well because I know that they had major philosophical differences on just like what the wrist is supposed to do when you play. Sure. So, you wouldn't be able to really go from one lesson to another, but composition is something that's kind of flexible and you can blend some things.
I think to an extent, I mean, even if you're not studying with a specific person, right, you probably interact with them in the hallways or maybe in larger, group. Like the entire composition department gets together once a week to discuss things. So you have a sense of what people are working on and what they're like. And so you kind of know if the personalities are going to mesh, same with those pianists, right? And I think even if it's a technique thing, like what are we doing with our wrists?
Right.
That's still a little bit of a personality thing. Yeah. And I know, okay, we're colleague, we work well together, but maybe not in that one-on-one intense, private lesson session. And I find that rotating teachers works a lot better at the undergraduate level where you're just here longer.
Yeah.
Our master's degree students typically don't switch teachers because they're only here for 2 years, right? So they get a year of lessons in, and then their second year, they're applying for doctoral programs or they're working on their big thesis composition, or other big projects. And a lot of times it makes more sense to just stay with somebody.
Right. Yeah. In undergraduate, I only had a primary composition teacher, but I had someone different for, actually had 2 different teachers for counterpoint, or fugal techniques,
Yeah.
Had a different teacher for orchestration. And there's something I'm forgetting in there, but electronic music, so had a different teacher for that. So I had 4 different teachers kind of covering the whole world, and they each brought some different elements, to the table for that. So it's always nice
absolutely.
to do that. On the other side of the table, I teach privately, and I usually have an average of 1 to 2 composition students as I'm going, and one of the ones I have, I'm actually proud of because I know she's at least seeking to go major in composition, and that would be my first, as a teacher, to have a high school student, go on and actually major in it. And
yeah, absolutely.
So, I'm not sure where she's going, but she wanted to, in an effort to take it more seriously, she has. In addition to taking piano/composition with me, she also is a composition teacher at the local conservatory, and I happen to know who this guy is, and I know how he teaches. So I'm trying not to even look at what she shows him. It's like what you show him, don't show me. Yeah. Let's talk about things that I know he doesn't do, like pop and jazz, for example.
Oh, great!
Let's get into that, and we'll talk also a little bit more about kind of some orchestration specifics, and also a little bit more to the business side of a composer. So these are some things that I know from my own experience with this other teacher that would not get mentioned, but that I can offer that's a little different. And I do
absolutely.
think if you're studying, if you can find teachers that can hit different angles of things, that's really good. Like the way someone thinks about a jazz band, it's almost like a different language than how they would think about writing for a symphony orchestra,
Oh, very different.
Yeah.
Especially because, you're first of all, the just completely different numbers of people. And then also, like, we use a much higher range for the trumpet in the jazz section than we do in the orchestra, because having a orchestral trumpet player playing, high Ds and stuff is just going to blow the roof off of all the string players.
Right. Well, one thing is also, so I never studied jazz at all till I studied for my master's. And that was the first time I had a course where, okay, you take something like a C13 sharp 11. Well, it's like, I know what that looks like, root third, fifth, seventh, ninth, sharp 11, 13. I know what that looks like on kind of like a textbook example. But the way a jazz player thinks of that is that's a D major triad over a C7. And the way a jazz arranger might do that is the trumpets get only the ninth sharp 11, 13, which is the D major, and that's their harmony, whereas maybe the saxophones and some other section have the C7 fundamentals. And I started thinking, what if I thought about chords like that when I'm writing orchestral music, and like the woodwinds have their own kind of little chord within this polychord, and the brass have their own chord, and it's like all of a sudden my classical music, my symphonic music sounded different. And I would have never even come to that conclusion without that different approach, that comes from jazz.
Absolutely.
Yeah. One of the things you mentioned when I talked to you before the interview was Nebraska's not an easy place to make professional connections during a pandemic. So have you had any success so far?
Maybe that was a harsh way of me putting it. I think anywhere. I moved to Nebraska in 2020.
Wow.
And so that was the hard part about it. I think now that I've been here for a year and a half,
right.
I have enough work, that I'm around, and a decent amount of people know who I am, and I've played with a handful of people.
Right.
But it's tough moving to a new state where you really don't have a bunch of professional connections, and then things are shut down. So it's a little bit tougher to get out there and do stuff, but, as things opened up, I was very careful to be around, events, going and seeing shows either in Lincoln and Omaha, which are only about an hour away from each other.
Yeah.
For instance, I was playing with a friend of mine a couple nights ago on New Year's Eve, and he had come to one of my gigs several months ago, and then I went to one of his a few months later, and then kind of us trading off attending each other's gigs led to us playing together.
Right.
And so it's kind of been slowly and surely it's been looking up. And then I'm also really lucky that I'm able to kind of do the networking part of things as a team with my wife, who is also a musician. Right. She works for the Omaha Symphony in their fundraising office. So she knows a lot of people in Omaha, and we're able to help each other out, and working as a team has been just amazing for us. And that's what works for us.
Right. A very important thing that you said there is just being around events.
Yeah, absolutely.
As a professional musician, I've only gotten gigs two different ways that I can ever think of. And one is somebody I've worked with before gives me a good reference. And then then I get a call or I get an email or something like that. And I connect with a new client that way. The other is I meet somewhere when I'm not trying to promote myself directly. I'm able to connect with someone by being an audience member, or I'm able to, I meet them at a party or something like that. And so if someone's doesn't have a reference for you, they have to like you as a person or feel like you're someone that they like to work with before they do that. What I think a lot of young music students don't realize is the world is not waiting to hire them because of their talent. And it's like that's almost a myth that you need to shed. The world is ready to hire. Well, people in the world are ready to hire you when you make a connection with them or establish some kind of a relationship.
Yeah. And it's especially, I really like that word relationship, because I think it's really easy to tell when somebody is coming up to you and their sole intention of coming up to you is looking for work.
Yeah.
That's obvious. And again, if you're the player that can hang, then okay, maybe we'll hire you and maybe we'll get to work together and it'll be good. But it's always better when you get to work with somebody that you also enjoy being around.
Yeah.
Especially in the pit where we're in tight physical space.
Yes.
And I don't, if I'm sitting there playing guitar, I don't necessarily want to sit next to somebody that I'm not going to get along with.
Exactly.
And so when we're meeting new people for the first time, it really has to come from a sincere place of just wanting to get to know them, even if the gigging part of it doesn't end up working out.
Right.
If you're the person that like, you don't get the gig and then all of a sudden you stop talking to that person, right? It's going to be pretty obvious that you weren't in it for any sort of, real, relationship connection, whatever you want to call it. But that you were in it really just for yourself.
Right. Yeah. And I think it takes a little bit of effort on just keeping that going. The cynical part of me has always noticed things like on Facebook, for example, the number of likes that I get from, likes and comments on posts from actors that are currently in a show that I'm music directing. But like maybe 5 or 10% will continue after the show.
Yeah.
And, there was a time that it used to bother me, but then I realized, but that's just human nature. It's like, I'm sure if I was to examine my own habits, I let people go and people let me go. But along the way, I find those connections that for indescribable reasons, they work. And those are new friends. Those are new future colleagues, and so forth. And so it's more about cherishing those small relationships you do get and not like worried about who people aren't connecting with you.
Sure. And I mean, everybody's lives are always changing and your situation is changing, right? Like I don't really talk to anybody that I went to high school with anymore.
Right.
Because we all kind of went our separate ways and, nothing bad, but, I moved to Oklahoma and then I moved to Nebraska and, a lot of people went and did their own things either in Texas or in other places. And, as time went on, our circles just kind of slowly moved away from each other. Nothing was ever a hard, okay, now I'm done talking to you.
Right.
But, people grow apart, and as sad as it is, it's kind of just part of it.
Well, it's not just geographically, but, people change as well. So I can say without a doubt, I am not the same person I was in high school. If I was to make a list, what hasn't changed? Well, it's like, I still love film music. That's still high on the list. It's like I still will listen to and enjoy a lot of the same rock bands I listened to at the time, but it's like if I heard them now for the first time, they wouldn't be my top choices, and so forth. So,
Right.
I can always tell when it's like there's a little nostalgia warmth
Yes.
that comes on when you hear certain things,
Yep.
and and I can recognize that's what it is. It's like, I'm not loving this for the music it is. I'm loving it for the feeling it gave me when I was 17.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm not sure how many shows you have done or if you have a lot of these moments, but I do always like to ask, do you have a moment that sticks out as like a horror moment or a scary moment from a show? And contrasting that, do you have a really fond moment, something that you always think about from doing shows?
Yes to both.
Yep.
Fortunately, I have way more positive experiences than negative experiences, and I guess that's what keeps me coming back. Right.
Right.
So I did a show in probably would have been the fall of 2019. I'm guessing while I was in my master's degree at OU, and my then fiance, now wife, she was doing her graduate work at Wichita State in Kansas. And we had both got hired to do a show outside of Wichita at a small local college. And the show was going really well and we had a good time doing it. There was one show, and I don't know what happened, but I had left the pit during intermission to use the restroom, and I came back down into the pit, and they had just finished the entr'acte.
Wow!
And it was the geographic setup where I was all the way at the end of the pit, and I couldn't get by while people were playing.
Wow! Yeah.
Right. My wife was able. I have no clue what happened. She was able to like run over to her chair real quick, pick up her flute, and go. But I had to wait until the entr'acte was completely over and then like cover my face and be like, sorry, and run back to my chair. So that's something that I think will stick with me, is just like accidentally staying in intermission a little too long.
Right.
So, and then I've had a lot of great opportunities to be in the pit. I use that in quotations, but not in a physical pit. So a lot of times we have the ability to at least see the audience, have the audience see us. And I think it's especially rewarding to play the music when you're also really familiar about what's going on stage.
Right.
So I know, like we were talking about Into the Woods earlier. I think there's a moment in Into the Woods that might be my favorite musical moment, just kind of all time, period.
Right.
Which is right before No One Is Alone starts playing. That scene is with Cinderella and Red Riding Hood, and they're kind of talking about, what life's going to be like now that the giant has come, and Red's parents are dead and Jack's parents are dead, and how we're going to come through this. And Cinderella is consoling her. And while she's consoling her, the flute starts playing her I Wish to Go to the Festival music way back from the beginning of the show.
Right.
Right. And this is all, everything that Cinderella has experienced has been because of her wanting to go to that festival and then meeting the prince. And then, having that relationship fall apart throughout Act 2. And now she's kind of become this de facto mother figure for her. And so using that theme in that completely new context is something that always gets to me every time. And so sitting in the pit and listening to that happen and kind of being able to peek up and watch that action happen on stage at the same time was extraordinarily rewarding for me.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Of course, one of the things I found challenging when you can watch what's going on is sometimes I found as a music director, I've got to like snap my fingers and get attention. And musicians will start watching. It's like, we got to play this cue.
Oh, for sure. You should always be paying attention to your book.
Yeah, that's true.
Knowing when to come in. I guess that's another, funny, failure moment was doing Godspell.
Right.
And that was a show where the band was backstage. And we couldn't, there was no monitor system, so we couldn't see what was happening for the show. And I don't know how familiar you are with that book, but there was a lot of downtime for the band. And so we would just kind of, sit around and goof off because nobody can see us and we can't really tell what's going on. And then all of a sudden the band came in with the Act 1 finale, and I was like, oh, I got to pick up my guitar real fast.
Yep. Yep.
That's true. But we're all having a good time, and
By the way, for the benefit of any listeners who heard you say when we talked about Into the Woods earlier, we just to clarify, we talked before we were recording, so it's like
yes,
I don't remember hearing that. That probably got left on the cutting room floor, but yeah. Are there any projects, any shows you're doing now, or any other projects you wanted to mention?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in a couple of weeks, I will be playing guitar for a workshop of a new musical.
Okay.
That's all about that I probably should say right now. But I think the expectation is for that show to be in Omaha around the end of May, beginning of June.
Okay.
So I'll be playing, I think right now the book is acoustic guitar and banjo.
Oh, great.
So looking forward to that. Outside of the theater realm, I'm working on a flute solo right now. Again, we were talking earlier about, writing a lot of solo instruments during the pandemic. So working on a flute solo for a friend that should get played on a few recitals throughout the spring semester. This is a semester where I get to present a doctoral composition recital.
Nice.
And so I'll be live streaming that on my social media platforms, and that'll feature a lot of the music that I've been working on while I've been here at UNL. And then the last kind of big project for the next few weeks, or I guess next few months, is myself and a few other UNL graduate students composed some works for an ensemble based in Lincoln called the Trace Chamber Society. That is kind of a small chamber group. And last May, we recorded both video and audio of all of those 4 pieces. And we're hoping that those will get released this semester. We're still in the kind of the final stages of post-production of all of that stuff. But so I composed a piece for that set, and I played guitar on one of those pieces.
Right.
So those will be probably available on Spotify in audio format, and the video collection will be posted online somewhere.
Nice.
But so we're looking forward to getting that music out there as well.
Well, good luck on all that, especially the composition recital, because I know what work has to go into doing that well. And that was before technology could live stream it, so I'm sure that's just an added thing now. And last, where can people follow you if they would like to do so?
Yeah, absolutely. You can follow. So always encourage people to check out my website, tannerharrod.com. Mm-hmm. You can also find me on Instagram at Tanner Harrod. You can find me on Twitter at _Tanner Harrod, I think. Though, fair warning, I don't get on Twitter all that much. Right. Live on Instagram a little bit more. Right. So, yeah, you can check me out on any social media platform and at tannerharrod.com.
Great. All right. Well, best of luck of this semester. And again, thanks for taking time to chat with me.
Thanks so much for having me.
And that wraps up episode number 62. And we will be back in a couple of weeks well, at least I think it'd be about a couple of weeks. Do follow us on social media so I can let you know. But I am working on getting actually a couple of different interviews, just not sure when they'll be ready. But definitely make sure that you're subscribed and following so that you will know. And as a reminder, if you want to follow what's coming up next, be sure to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook at Life in the Pit Pod. And you can follow me on Instagram at David Lane Music or Twitter and Facebook at David M. Lane Music. As always, a special thanks to Mark Parolo for his cover art and to Bill Cisna for providing the introduction to this podcast. The theme music is composed and performed by David Lane. You can find out more about the podcast, leave a donation, or leave feedback at lifeinthepitpod.com. Please rate and review on the Apple Podcast app or wherever you receive this podcast, and please share with your friends. Thank you for listening.